I haven't done a video dedicated to a video game developer with their games to review since Tim Schafer, but there was one video game developer that took the interactive gameplay in the next biggest step in gaming. That man is French developer Eric Chahi. Even though he hasn't made that many games, but he has two games that are very important to the cinematic platformer month that I'm currently doing. So let's begin this review. Around the time when the Commodore 64 and the Amiga were the way to go for PC gaming, a lot of developers were making games that was realistic for their time, and Chahi has entered the gaming business working with Delphine Software. Chahi was impressed by this flat collar animation that the Amiga version of Dragon's Lair had, and thought that it would be possible to use vector outlines to create a similar effect using much less computer storage. This has given him the idea of making a game that has never been done before. This game has taken him 2 years in creating such a game. Then in 1994, he finally released Another World, or Out of This World in North America. And this is clearly a game that the industry has never quite seen before. It told a tale of a young physicist named Lester Knight Shaken, who was transported to another dimension when a lightning struck in his laboratory while he was running an experiment. There, he entered in a hostile alien world, where he was later captured as prisoner, and thus he made an alien friend named Buddy, who both worked together to find an escape and find a way for Lester to get back home. The reason why this game is very innovative is that it's not like other games where they just go through level to level, but rather, Another World has made a narrative adventure, meaning that wherever you end up, it was part of the story. And even more groundbreaking, how cinematic the game actually is. I forgot to mention that this game is a cinematic platformer reminiscing to Prince of Persia, but what Chahi made in this game is to make everything surrounding Lester to be interactive. There are a lot of puzzles in this game where you have to use your environment to solve it, and many of them requires quick thinking and reaction in order to survive. And occasionally at times, you'll find Buddy giving you passageways and help you on your quest. The way you play this game is to get from point A to B. With so many interactions, you have so many ways to die in Another World. These enemy aliens are very vicious and very smart that they will not hesitate to kill you when they see you. Luckily, you can defend yourself with a laser gun that not only shoots out lasers, but charge up to make a bigger blast, and also creates a force field which protects you from oncoming lasers fired by enemy aliens. But with so many stuff trying to kill you, keep in mind that you can have instant deaths at any time in this game, which creates the intensity for Another World to be one of the most intense 2D platformers you will ever see. And some of the ways to die in this game are very well crafted, ingenious, and brutal at the same time. The reason why this game aged so well is that it has one of the most outstanding animation you can ever see in a video game. Eric Chahi made sure that the cause of death isn't cheap by giving you a cutscene of how Lester dies. This was another innovative thing that has never been done in gaming before. This is one of the very first games that actually put cutscenes within the video game. I mean, like wherever you end up in the game, the story becomes stronger by showing some cutscenes and understand the game's universe that could not really work with the gameplay alone. But the biggest part of this game is the atmosphere. From the soundtrack, sound effects, level designs, character interaction, this is one of the most atmospheric and immersive 2D platformers I have ever played. What surprises me about this 2D platformer compared to the other ones is how mature and seriously this game is being taken. I mean, the major focus on this game is what 2D platformers can actually do in terms of storytelling, usage of technology, and interactive gameplay. This is very ingenious to see something like this in the early 90s, because back then we were still in the standards of having the laws of physics being broken. But here in Another World, this was actually the very first video game that actually felt cinematic within the game. I mean, playing the game almost made it look like a movie at the time. And you know what? The presentation in this game to this day is very amazing to look at. My favorite part in this game is the ultimate finale. I'm not going to spoil too much, but the part where Buddy was trying to save you from the alien, and Lester was crawling on the ground trying to activate the switch to stop the fight, was indeed one of the only cinematic platformers that ever made me broke a sweat. But for the rest, you really need to see for yourself. But keep in mind, like all cinematic platformers, they all have trial and error, and Another World is no exception. If you die a lot in this game, then it will take you a lot of hours to beat this game. But if you memorize every aspect of this game and try to beat it without dying, then it would probably take less than an hour to beat the game. But again, this game is not easy. It's surprising how many people have forgotten how Another World really is groundbreaking. And they've forgotten how much the game innovated to all the stuff that we have today. Of course, nowadays we have cinematic graphics, epic storytelling, and interactive gameplay. But back in 1991, Another World has provided so much innovations that we all take for granted today. But even more surprising, Eric Chahi made this game all by himself. And a game like this that was crafted by one man you have to show appreciation for everything that Eric Chahi has made. The game was so phenomenal that it inspired so many other developers, like Hideo Kojima from the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and Fumito Ueda from Ico. Another World itself was a technical achievement from what video games are capable of. Not only that this game stands the test of time of being amazing to play, and not only this is one of the greatest games of all time, but this is probably one of the most important games in history. That's why I give Another World a 6 fingers out of 5. This game was a major technical achievement, and without it, who knows how many years behind we would actually be. Another World was ported to other systems like the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, 3DO, and so on, but the best version you can possibly get is the 15th Anniversary Edition, because this was Chahi's ultimate vision of the game, where it included new levels and new enemies, and so much varieties that wasn't in the original version. But after making Another World, Chahi has decided to make his own video game company called Amazing Studios, and his next game was going to triple the amount of time to make Another World. While still in development, other cinematic platformers has expanded the genre. A year later, Delphine Software has released Flashback. Blizzard Entertainment has made Blackthorn, the sequel for Another World, Heart of the Alien, which was a huge disappointment that Eric Chahi has no part of. Oddworld Inhabitants has made the Oddworld series, and so much more. Then after 6 long years of developing the game, Eric Chahi has finally released Heart of Darkness in 1998 for the PC and the Sony PlayStation. The story opens up when Andy got out of school and he met up with his dog Whiskey, and they were relaxing in the park where everybody was gathered to see the eclipse. Then all hell broke loose when something out of the ordinary took Whiskey to another dimension. After shedding a few tears, Andy went to his treehouse and opened his laboratory. Wait a minute, how is a kid actually capable of owning a laboratory and still manages to make it work? Okay, let's just suspend our disbelief for a moment here. There he got in his homemade laser rifle and powered up his homemade interdimensional transporter, and thus he entered a hostile world where the Master of Darkness has reigned. His servants, who intended to kidnap Andy, and mistaken kidnapped identities with his dog Whiskey. So what does the Dark Master want with Andy? It never was explained. So the Dark Master has sent his Dark Army to capture Andy, who has entered their world. So basically, Heart of Darkness is a reenactment of Another World, and did it with a much more mediocre job, and unlikable characters, and some of the most outdated CGI cutscenes I have ever seen. Even for 1998 standards, I have seen cutscenes that are much more superior than this, with the amigos reminding me of Jar Jar Binks, and the worst child protagonist since Jake Lloyd from the Phantom Menace, and the plot being non-existent, and offered some of the worst voice acting and plot holes I have seen in a video game. What made this game even worth a damn? Short answer, the game itself. And this is one of those games that has a really bad story, but makes it up for it because of the gameplay. Just looking at the gameplay itself is much more better than the outdated CGI cutscenes. So basically, if you're not interested in the story, press the start button and just jump into the game. And I just want to say that the animation and the character interaction is a major improvement. You can already tell that Eric Chahi has spent so much hard work on the gameplay itself, and pretty much the story and the cutscenes were rushed. The enemies are indeed vicious and intimidating, but luckily you got yourself a laser beam rifle, but unfortunately you only have it in the beginning. But later on, Andy will have the ability to shoot Hadoukens out of his hand and return his laser cannon. But I'm not just here for the action, I'm here for the platforming and the challenge, and that's what Heart of Darkness really does well, as you will encounter a lot of puzzles, obstacles that put your platforming skills to the test, and encountering the unknown that comes in all shapes and sizes. And the death scenes in this game is just as brutal as Another World, but a lot more disturbing since this is a kid involved. So how the heck did this game get an E rating? But luckily you have infinite lives, as there are checkpoints that are few and far between. I also love the physics in this game, as they also have shadow effects that are also interactive. Some shadow effects might come to life, and for others you can use your own shadow to solve puzzles. Some of these puzzle solvings are really clever, but at the same time they're pretty cheap due to the fact that so many people can't figure out some of these puzzles on their own. But one thing that Heart of Darkness really does well is atmosphere. There are plenty of areas in this game that are so gorgeous and very well crafted. And to top it all down is how interactive everything in this environment is. So is Heart of Darkness a really good game? I know I might regret this because my hatred for the cutscenes, but the gameplay and the designs are really outstanding. But it still cannot surpass the awesomeness from Another World. but it is fair to say that this is one of the PS1's library's most hidden gem. Since the release of Heart of Darkness, it commercially failed, which made Eric Chahi's company, Amazing Studios, to go bankrupt. But since this game is so unfamiliar to the public, I do recommend playing this game only because of the gameplay. And that's the only reason why I even play video games in the first place. So for the gameplay itself, I have to give this a 5 fingers out of 5. It was just an amazing game to play, but nowhere near close to Another World. It almost felt like a spiritual successor of Another World, because there's so many elements in this game that reflect to Another World that you can't help but to find it a guilty pleasure at times. But since Eric Chahi hasn't made another game since Heart of Darkness, after over a decade of absence, Eric Chahi has decided to work for Ubisoft, and his next upcoming game, which is announced that it's going to be released 2011, is a game called From Dust, which was shown in E3 2010. And from the looks of it, it really looks like a promising game. So Eric Chahi, welcome back to the gaming industry, my friend. And hopefully this is the game that will make us change the way we think about games, just as it did with Another World. So that's my tribute review for Eric Chahi. So give a thumbs up, post a comment, and if you like what you just saw, please subscribe.